Our first story tonight is the reaction trailing federal government's decision to remove mathematics as a compulsory subject for art students seeking admission into tertiary institutions. Now, recently, Minister of Education Dr Tunji Alausa provided a breakdown of modifications to the new curriculum. According to a statement by Boriowo Folashade, Director of Press and Public Relations at the Federal Ministry of Education, the decision follows the approval of the national guidelines for entry requirements into tertiary institutions in Nigeria, which the minister explained as new policy. Aimed at demonstrating access to tertiary education and empowering Nigerian youths, according to one stakeholder. Quote, "Our education minister loves to make frequent changes. The problem is that you don't know the problem that he wants his changes to tackle. It seems to me that sometimes his solutions are looking for problems. If over 60% of students who wrote NECO this year got a credit in mathematics, then what is the problem? Who said an art student doesn't require mathematics for this profession? Like I always ask, what is the problem that this man seeks to solve?" End quote. Well, let's see if we can get some response now as to what problems or none he's seeking to solve. Education consultant Professor Yomi Fawehinmi joins me now. Thank you for being here. I mean, everybody was curious. I'm doing great, sir. Aside this, it's left a lot of persons confused. Mathematics. Let's hear your initial thoughts as to perhaps the logic behind this, because I had to go look if it was just junior secondary, but it's not. It's from senior secondary school. Explain to us what you think the rationale might be behind this decision.
Okay, thanks. Based on the release by the Honorable Minister, so it's signed on behalf of the Ministry of Education, the rationale is because they believe that, and the data actually shows that we're not getting enough people to go to higher institutions. So their belief is that we have almost 2 million people that write the UTME every year, but on average, between 600 and 700,000 eventually gain admission. So they believe that the problem is because there are some entry barriers that is not allowing people to gain admission to higher institutions. And they believe one of those entry barriers is asking art students to have credit pass in WAEC. So they believe that if they remove that from that barrier, then they are estimating that between 400 and 300, there are about 1,000 students will be able to gain admission, and therefore will maybe crossing over 1 million. That is their belief. I do not know the logic of the data they are saying, but the data I have seen shows that is not the issue. And like I always try to say that sometimes with the minister, you always ask yourself, I mean, for somebody whose background is in medicine, diagnosis is very important for us to follow a scientific model. If you look at Nigeria's statistics for admission, you realize that we have 4 categories of higher institutions in Nigeria. You have the universities, you have the polytechnics/monotechnics, you have the colleges of education, and you have the IAIs. What has happened over the years is that the place where people are not taking up their admission quota the most is the College of Education. The issue is that universities, a lot more people apply to, that's what is most applied to, followed by polytechnics, but IAIs and that's innovation centers and the colleges of education is where people are not applying to. So it's not a question of whether they have English or they don't have or maths. It's a question that people are applying, too many people are applying to spaces in the universities, and there are hundreds of thousands of spaces in college education that people are not applying to. That is the problem. The problem is not that they have maths or not, because data shows this year over 60% of people passed NECO had credit in maths. So that's not the problem. And you ask yourself, what exactly, if you have identified a problem, we want to ensure that at least 1 million people go to a institution, then look at where is the bottleneck. The bottleneck is not admission. The bottleneck is not from the fact that you are asking art students to have math. The bottleneck is that one of those 4 places where people should go to, people don't want to go there. So that's what they should tackle. A part of the way to tackle is, for example, ensure the College of Education become faculties of existing universities. So, for example, before now, Adeyemi College of Education was just a College of Education, but because it was a faculty in Obafemi University, more people applied there than to, for example, Centrado's College of Education in Oyo. So, what we should do is to elevate the status of this College of Education to be able to accommodate more people. Think about what happens in Lagos State. See the admission figures of the College of Education owned by Lagos State. Before it became a university and after, Nigerians are driven by universities. So that College of Education, we have many of them in Nigeria. That's where we are having people not going to. That's what we should tackle. Not saying people should not do math. Now, the other part of it is that there are now people, you know, when this kind of, there are people who come with all manner of argument, what kind of, they're like, so what do you need maths for to study music? Science tells us that the part of the brain that you need to develop your musical skill is also the same part of the brain you need to develop your mathematical skills. So anybody who is good in music.
Prof, let me slide, because anything education, I'm particularly passionate about it, and I will use myself as an instance in this case to ask the question I want to ask. Mathematics has always been a struggle for me, even from primary up until secondary school, until somehow, it's still a miracle how I passed maths, right? I still struggle with maths, even after secondary school. What are the implications we are looking at here? If students get to GSS 3, for instance, and they are told that, I mean, you don't need maths, so you don't need to bother about understanding anything. What are the long-term implications beyond having the prerequisites to develop a part of your brain to learn music or those technical things?
Yeah, I mean, great question. There are quite a number of immediate effects. The most immediate effect is that, like you said, students who are afraid of math, who before will find ways to just ensure they stay in math class, will just move to arts. So there'll be an increased number of people doing arts. Now, this minister should remember that we have a national policy that says admission to university should be 60% science, 40% arts. So most students will immediately rush to the arts so that they can escape maths. That is the immediate thing that will happen, which is not good for us, because rather than for those children to stay and learn the maths, they wouldn't do that. Now, what is the long-term effect is the fact that we are stifling people's career. This lady was one of the running people that wanted to become president of the US. She was the CEO of HP, the guys who make all these laptops and whatever. She studied liberal arts. We have had somebody who studied history. We had Adamushi Roma was the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Was, I think, the 4th governor. I think he studied history or something in humanities at the University of Ibadan. But you know, despite the fact that he studied history, because of his knowledge of his maths, he could go to become the Central Bank governor. Career-wise, we are limiting our children's option, because now, you know, this boy does not know anything about maths. He studied history, he studied whatever. Therefore, if career choices become much limited, because we have allowed him not to do that. Now, let's also talk about the potential for his craft or his trade. A couple of days back, I had to speak with a fashion designer. They said we should not call them tailors again. And I was trying to take a measurement and send it to him. And I was telling the guy, oh, I have measured my head, this is what it is. And the tailor told me something when he told me to measure a part of my body. He said, sir, that cannot be the length. I said, why? He said, because it's not proportional to the other parts you have given me. I said, please explain. He said there is a relationship between this side of your body and this side of your body. And because you have given me this length you are giving me cannot be correct. So based on what he said, I measured again and realized I made a mistake. That is my fashion designer, my tailor. What was he talking about? He was talking about ratios. He was talking about direct relationship. He was talking about the negation of inverse relationship.
I mean, the connection, Prof, not to interrupt you, but the connection and the importance of mathematics is not on, I mean, nobody can, you know, gloss over it for any reason, under any guise. I think that begs the question, what could be the discussions within your circles? Were there consultations before this decision was made? Did they look at the long-term implication of this decision? Is there a possibility that we will see this decision rescinded by the next minister?
I mean, a great question. One of the questions we need to ask ourselves is that we have in our policy-making process for education, we have a body called the National Council of Education. Was this issue taken there? There was a body supposed to sit down to review and recommend to the National Council of Education. Did that happen? I struggle with the fact that we seem to have a federal minister now who is taking a lot of education that should be the decision to be made by the National Council of Education. Granted, it's the chairman of the National Council of Education, but the stakeholder involvement. The second thing is that this question of something happening almost immediately. Just a couple of weeks back, we were talking about immediate start of new curriculum. Now, we're talking about this again. Why don't we have increased stakeholder engagement? Why don't we have schools? Why don't we have parents get involved in conversation? Why don't we have national conversations whether this maths thing should be there or not? I think part of the thing that is happening is that we are having a minister that is taking on roles that should not be the role of a minister. I'm talking about the law. The law in Nigeria that sets up each university states the Senate shall be the one that determines the entry requirements. The Minister for Education has no power based on our laws to tell us what is the entry requirement to it, because that's what he has done. He has technically taken over the role of the Senate of the university. But the other thing for us as parents is to ask ourselves, what will you do with your child? My recommendation to every parent watching is that please, if your child wants to study art, try your best to ensure that that child does mathematics. Please note what the minister changed is entry requirement. It did not say graduation requirement from high school. So each school can still say everybody must do maths.
Do you see that happening? I mean, it seems we want to talk about state independence. We want to talk about state independence, tertiary institutions' independence, but we also know that there is a level of politics that you will consider when you want to. Do you think our institutions basically have what it takes to hold a decision that you must have mathematics to take any subject in this school, when the Federal Ministry of Education says otherwise? And just to add to it, the question that you haven't taken on is, will this decision sustain long term?
Well, we don't know. It's difficult to predict the future. But if I became the Minister for Education, I'm going to reverse this. I also believe that many people who have a background in education will likely reverse this. One thing that I think we all should realize, and I think the minister should realize, that the purpose of taking a subject in school is not to pass it. You know, so when people say, oh, our students don't pass math, so therefore they should not do it. Part of what you learn in a subject is the discipline of the subject. You know, when you start a subject in high school, they typically tell you geography is the discipline, economics is the discipline, or the science. You see, that calling it a discipline is because it creates values in you that helps you, even though you may not pass the subject. So think about a child who attends a class of English language for 6 years. He may not pass English, but he will imbibe the values of the discipline called English language.
All right, Prof, I'm told we don't have much time for this. So could you just take on the part about individual universities saying that they will do a maths despite Ministry of Education's decision? In 47
One, the fact is that the law says that the Senate should determine what a university wants as admission requirement. So a university has the right to say, Minister, this is not your duty. Secondly, there were also universities when we had a former minister that said they should not take a particular age. I remember the vice chancellor of Obafemi University came out clearly and said Obafemi University will take students as low as 60 years old. So we have had vice chancellors at various times that show their autonomy. And this is a call to ASU. ASU is currently on strike. Felicity, one question you should ask yourself is, ASU strike started on Monday. I thought this minister should be bothered about that or not. Why is he throwing this in? Is it to distract us from the issues about ASU? You check yourself in the midst of all the issues. ASU is on strike. SANU and NASU are on protest. They have given a deadline to start a strike in the next couple of days. We have other squares to also
basically,
threaten.
there are so many issues. We don't even know which one to focus on more. Yeah.
Man, just wake up on a Tuesday and say the most important thing is remove mathematics. You ask yourself, in the scheme of what is happening now, how does that become priority for a country where your universities are shut down because of strike?
Yeah, Prof, we really have to go. We really have to go. As always, thank you very much for being here.
All right, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
You too, sir.